Sebastian Fundora pulls off the upset and gets the decision over Tszyu. What we're going to talk about, one, is was the decision fair? Do you think it was a robbery? And two, what should happen moving forward? Now, actually, maybe probably in some other segments, we'll talk about that. But for this segment in particular, I'm going to start off by saying I scored the fight 114-114. I had the fight a draw. I was listening to the commentary on Amazon Prime, and Joe Goosen and Abner Mares were saying they felt like Sebastian Fundora was winning the fight. I didn't see it that way. I thought it was a very close fight, and in the end, I thought the fight was a draw. And so, for that reason, I don't think it was a robbery. I do think, however, when people say robbery, they're thinking about how Tszyu caught a raw deal. So first, Keith Thurman has to pull out of the fight with a bicep injury, right? And on 12 days' notice, Keith Thurman is replaced with Sebastian Fundora, which, if you watch the prior video that I made when we were talking about this, I felt like Sebastian Fundora was a more difficult fight than Keith Thurman would have been. And that's because he's 6'6" tall. So he's extremely tall for the 154-pound division. Hell, he'd be tall for a heavyweight. You're talking about Anthony Joshua's height. You're talking about around Deontay Wilder's height. So he has that height, but he's fighting in the 154-pound division. That is what makes him a unique challenge for anyone. Of course, he was coming off of being knocked out by Brian Mendoza, and Tszyu had beaten Brian Mendoza, which he has now lost to Sebastian Fundora. So there you go with the triangle theories. Although in this case, I think this is an example of why you can't use triangle theories due to the reason why Tszyu lost, which we'll get into in a second. But sticking with the point, there was a replacement, and both of these fighters agreed. Now, these are two fighters who are very talented, very skilled, and they take their careers seriously. So, of course, there was immense risk with accepting a fight this difficult on both sides on 12 days' notice. But Sebastian Fundora said, Manny Pacquiao announced himself to the world, taking a short notice fight. I'm going to do the same. And I think Tszyu felt like he had the skills to win. He felt like he was better than Mendoza. He had just beaten Mendoza. Mendoza had just knocked out Fundora. So, and I think he's a confident fighter. So he said, let's do it. Now, there is that. Now, not only did Tszyu agree to fight a difficult fighter with a difficult stature who present a completely different challenge than Keith Thurman on 12 days' notice as champion, but in the second round of that fight, he gets cut in the worst possible place you can get cut. That's what Stitch Duran said. Stitch, the legendary cutman. That's what Jim Lampley said. And Jim Lampley's been around boxing longer than we've been alive times two. Well, longer than I've been alive times two. And Jim Lampley saying that was the worst place you can get a cut. So he gets that cut at the end of the second round. Now, if you watch the fight, Tszyu was masterful the first two rounds. I was impressed with his IQ. He stayed in good range. He made Fundora miss within inches, and then he countered with a beautiful, beautiful right hand all the time. And so I felt like Tszyu was doing the appropriate things. He was doing the proper things. And he'd even rocked Fundora up to that point. Once the blood started flowing in Tszyu's face, you can see him pawing at the blood. You can see his punch output drop. You can see he wasn't as aggressive as he was prior to getting the cut. He seemed to be more preoccupied with the cut. He seemed to be more defensive. And that's when, credit Fundora, he started to take the play with his jab. And everyone's saying how he started using his jab and he started to control the fight with his jab. My thing is, was he controlling the fight, or was Tszyu being less aggressive because he couldn't see the openings due to the blood that was rushing into his eyes? Now, Tszyu went on to say at the end of the fight, he couldn't see because blood was getting into his eyes. And all you had to do was look at his face and you can tell. Look at how his punch output dropped from the second round to the third round on. And you can't tell me he was fatigued. He wasn't fatigued. And then you also have to think about the impact that so much blood rushing from your head is having on your body. And so he fought his way through, and I thought he earned a draw on my scorecard. It was 114, 114. I thought it was a draw. But for those who feel like Sebastian won maybe by a round, I wouldn't argue with that, right? I wouldn't argue with that. Those who feel like Tszyu won by a round, I wouldn't argue with that. Um, I do have issues with wide scoring in this fight. I don't think it was that type of fight. I think it was, you know, at the most, one fighter would take 2 rounds, and then the other fighter would come right back and get around. So, but still, very close fight. Unfortunately, Tszyu lost his title. Now, here's why I think people are saying he got robbed. Because one, his his replacement on 12 days was someone who's a very good fighter. Suffered one minor hiccup, and of course, people were ready to write him off. And his stature makes him extremely unique because of his height and his weight class. And so, one, the fact that Fundora was the replacement is why some people feel like he got a raw deal. Another reason why people feel like Tszyu got a raw deal is because the fight should have been a DQ. Well, not DQ, it should have been a no contest. Once that bad cut was open from an elbow and not a punch, Tszyu shouldn't have had to fight with that huge cut and blood in his face disadvantage, especially as the champion. But what ended up happening was PBC needed to save the card. 2 rounds of boxing, you can't go to the scorecards. 2 rounds of boxing, right? With the cut, people are going to feel robbed because it was a pay-per-view. This wasn't a regular card. This was, I mean, I paid $70 to watch the fight. So people paid to watch the fight. So you can't have the fight in on an elbow with a cut. And so Tszyu was put in a position where he had to save the card again. So the first time Tszyu had to save the card was when Thurman pulled out. He had to accept a really good championship caliber fighter on 12 days notice, who's completely different stature-wise and stylistically than Keith Thurman. Then the second time Tszyu had to save the card was when he got hit with an elbow, which is an illegal blow. And I'm not saying Fundora did it on purpose. It looked like a complete accident. It looked like, just bad luck, incidental contact. I don't think it was intentional by Fundora. And I don't think Tszyu wanted to cut his head open. So it was an unfortunate accident. But the fact remains, Tszyu had to continue fighting to save the card, because if he says, I can't see at the end of the second round, and they stop the fight at the end of the second round, it becomes a no contest. And then everyone's screaming, oh, I feel robbed. I want my money back. I paid all that money. And it was the very first card on Amazon Prime. The very, very first card on Amazon Prime with PBC. So Tszyu was in an awkward position where he had to save this event twice. And he did that. And to me, he fought to a draw, and he still didn't get the decision. And I think that's why people feel like Tszyu was robbed. But in the end, it was a close fight. But when you look at the totality of the circumstances, you feel like Tszyu got a raw deal. And that's why a lot of people are hoping that Tszyu gets the rematch. Personally, I want Tszyu to get the rematch as well. But in the next segment, you'll see when we discuss the rematch clause and what's being said, it doesn't really seem like that might happen, although Tszyu has a rematch clause. But in the end, I thought it was a tremendous fight. You got to give Fundora credit, because Fundora was bloody. He was swallowing blood as well. It was a bloody blood and guts fight by both fighters. It's just unfortunate that Tszyu had to lose his title that way. And I'll close by saying this. I don't remember the years. I'm going off the top. Like, I don't be researching everything. I've watched boxing enough. I've seen enough boxing in my life to know. It's similar. This fight is similar to me, Roy Jones and Montel Griffin. I don't remember the year. I just remember the first fight. Montel Griffin took a knee, and Roy Jones hit him in the face, and then he went out, and Roy got disqualified, and that was Roy's first loss. So Roy had a loss, but everyone knew he took that loss because he hit Montel Griffin when he was down. And then in the rematch, Roy completely destroyed Montel Griffin, just walked through him, obliterated him. It was a massacre. And then from that point on, Roy was able to resume with his career as if he was undefeated. It was like, yeah, everyone knew he had an L. People looked at the L, but they also knew Roy wasn't beaten. They knew the reason why he took the L. This is one of the rare times where I see a fighter in a similar position with Tim Tszyu, where I feel like, yes, Tim Tszyu has an L, but if Tim Tszyu is able to get the rematch and knock out Sebastian Fundora in the rematch, I think similar to Roy Jones, people are going to look at Tszyu and say, yeah, he has an L, but he really didn't take a loss, right? It was a last minute replacement, cut by elbow in the second round. He fought through all the blood and everything. And some people, and it still lost a split decision. Like, and some people still feel like he should have got the dub. So similar to Roy Jones, Montel Griffin, where Roy was able to avenge the loss, and most people still saw him as being undefeated because of the way he took the L. I think that Tim Tszyu, if he gets the rematch and he handles the fight the right way, he can be seen like Roy Jones, where people are going to see his L and be like, yeah, but he really didn't take a loss. We know what happened. It was unfortunate circumstances that defeated Tszyu. It wasn't Sebastian Fundora who defeated Tszyu. So that's my take on that. Let me know what you think in the comment section. For all the new subscribers, thank you, man. It's crazy. I done went from 200 to 400 extremely fast. I appreciate the support. Thank you. Much respect. Let me know how you feel about this in the comment sections. In the comment section. I'm out. Peace.